what would you guys say was one of the biggest challenges you had when you were starting out, and what did you learn from it?
For me, would be just kind of fighting through the housing market downturn. That it was the timeline of how long it took to scale the franchise system, how many franchises we really had to have it be at scale was probably the most challenging thing, and not being able to afford the resources, the people, the personnel, the software systems that we're going to be able to, help elevate the company faster. So it was a very kind of slow growth grind. And then in those early days as a franchisor, we were way more dependent on each and every franchise owner. And so there's a little bit of a leverage challenge there. Franchise owner gets big and kind of thinks he or she knows more than the brand or more than the founders. And so there's some friction there that was a little bit challenging.
Sure, that makes perfect sense to me. Omar, what are some of your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would agree with all of that. I would say we were always chasing growth. The brand was always a little bit bigger than the stake behind it.
What do you mean by that?
That, we had the brand was, from our very first truck, people were like, "Are you guys a franchise? I see you everywhere." And the brand was always bigger than, I think, the business.
Okay.
And so we were always we had to put the systems in place. We didn't have the revenue model, the business model, the training systems. We couldn't afford the people at the time that could put those systems in place. So we were always a little bit behind the eight ball. And then it, sort of comes together, call it 2015, where all of a sudden we had the system and the sizzle. We had the brand and the meat behind it that proved it. And that's where, the unit economics of the franchisees come into play. Successful franchisees is going to be what sells more franchisees.
Mm-hmm. Did you guys bootstrap the company yourselves starting out?
Yeah,
we did. Yeah, the only outside capital was really just for the vehicle loans and some real estate when we bought our first office. A few years into the business.
That's awesome. Yeah, I did the same thing, and I have no regrets. Though I think starting out now, if we were starting a brand, could we do what we all did in the 2000s?
I wouldn't want to.
I wouldn't want to. I'm glad I did it. It taught us how to run a business, how to do it frugally, how to manage a budget, how to kind of play Moneyball. But I don't think I could do that twice. I think it's something that you do once, you prove yourself, and then you go raise capital if you do it a second time. Because this hair loss and
I know
all that stuff. That's a bootstrap business.
It's real.
What book I wish we had read in the early days is Shelley Sun's book from Bright Star Care. It's called Grow Smart, Risk Less. And because she started around the time we did, but obviously it was a rocket ship of a success story. But her book really kind of lays out the blueprint of what a franchisor looks like at sort of each stage, getting your first franchises, how many franchises you need. And then obviously, your book is very relevant as well. That didn't exist back then. Mm-hmm. So I think that those would have been very helpful. Some very franchise specific best practices.
Yeah, we didn't really have a lot of those resources when we were starting.
We didn't have podcasts like this either. It was the IFA. The IFA, to its credit, had a lot of good resources, but it was still kind of figuring it out on your own type of thing.
Plus, I don't know about you, but I didn't feel like when I would go to an IFA event that I really fit in, because I would go to these conferences and I'm among the big boys.
Yeah, you got McDonald's and then
and then us.
Like, how do we get there?
Right. What do we need to do? And they were obviously able to afford, a management team that we couldn't afford. We were definitely not royalty sufficient. Mm-hmm. And it was all about, like, how do I keep the lights on? It was about, how do I sell more franchises? And how do I build the systems at the same time? It was all what you mentioned earlier, Nick, about the E-Myth Revisited. Mm-hmm. It was all about, how do I build the systems and processes while I try to keep things going.
Yeah. And I'll say two things that were, I would say, critical building blocks for us was, number one, where we made the conscious sort of intentional decision to become purpose-driven and values-based. And I know it's kind of cliche to talk about your core values and being a purpose-driven organization, but we had gone to enough conferences and read enough books to realize that companies and organizations that withstand the test of time are ones that are not just chasing money or economics, but they're chasing an impact. And so we created our company purpose, our core values, and set those in place. And I think that started attracting a lot of passion and energy of franchise owners and team members. And then a few years into that, we realized that we were actually missing a key ingredient of accountability, performance-based accountability, because we started saying, well, without margin, there's no mission. So we have to be able to perform and hold people accountable to the results. And we've got to have a vibrant, welcoming company culture. And I think those two sort of levers pulled simultaneously is what fueled the momentum to what we are today.
I think that makes perfect sense to me. And I do see your brand as a brand with great passion behind it. There is a lot of meaning. There is a lot of, how do I put it? There's a lot of energy with the people that are part of your team, whether I see it on social media or, at a franchise conference. And that's obviously, indicative of on how you guys have built this company.
It has to be. It's a hard job. It's moving, death, divorce. Those are the most stressful things in someone's life. And we're going into people's homes that are going through one of the most stressful things in their lives. We're doing a job that you wouldn't do for your best friend.
Right.
So,
even for pizza and beer.
Right. Even for pizza and beer. So it's, a little bit of organized chaos. And the way I describe it is, and it's probably similar for many franchises, is like tech companies are run a certain way, but our types of businesses are run like, in my opinion, a football team. You got the head coaches, you got the linebacker coach, the defensive coordinator. We've got the headsets on. Our job is to motivate the team. Our job is to recruit the team members. Our job is to follow the system and run the playbook and get the people on the bus and get the wrong people off the bus. So it's like very much a sports mentality. Whereas, if you're a fintech company, you can have 8 people in a room programming. It's not the same. It's very people dependent. In order to get people on the team to really buy in, they have to have that higher purpose.
Yeah, I think that is spot on, especially when you talk about the team members, because I don't know about you guys, but do you feel like I don't want to say the quality, because we've all had really terrific people that have worked for us. How has the staffing evolved from the time you started out and you were hiring to a few years back?
Yeah, I think the dynamics of the team evolve and the personnel evolves as the business grows. And one of the things that is a core value in our organization is building leaders. And so the idea is that we want to always be getting better, Omar and I as the founders, but we also want to make sure that everybody else in the organization has that same level of focus on improving themselves. But we also want to be realistic that doesn't mean everybody gets promoted as the business grows, because, for somebody to move from the minor leagues in baseball to the major leagues in baseball, you got to be the very best player at the minor league level, and there's got to be an opening at the major league level. And so we make that analogy very clear and transparent that not everybody's going to move up to be the major league executive. Some people might hit a ceiling, and that's okay. And maybe they're happy in remaining in the seat, or maybe they graduate to go do something else. And so over time, we've had team members continue to evolve and grow with the organization. Our current brand president started out as our financial controller, and even before that, he was a undergraduate college student doing a case study about our company before he joined the organization. And then we've got, guys on the truck who have gone on to own franchises, but not everybody can make that leap. And so there are people that started off with the organization that either loved it so much they wanted to go own their own franchise, or they moved on to go do other things as the business evolved and grew.
Business, just like sports, is about beating the odds. It takes, for every 100 applicants, one becomes a truck captain. For every 100 truck captains, one might become an ops manager. For every 100 of those, maybe one will become a franchise partner. So it's all about beating the odds. And the early days, it's like Pee-wee soccer, right? Where Nick and I are chasing the ball around.
Everybody's running with us.
Everyone's running with us, and then you kind of evolve to high school sports. We got our plays, and then all of a sudden, I'd like to consider we're like Alabama football, or I guess the New England Patriots aren't the
what
team
they used
anymore.
to be.
What they used to be,
Right,
but you got Nick Saban, and you've got the system, and you've got the brand, and you've got the coaching staff, the coaching tree, and all of that.
Yeah, I think that, the analogy that Omar just described is spot on. Is, in the early days, it was kind of managed chaos, and over time it professionalizes, and the identity and the culture remains the same, but the professionalism and the structure and the discipline continues to elevate. And that's the only way. If the business is going up in a upward direction, the people have to be moving at the same trajectory. Otherwise, they're going to be pulling the business downwards, and you can't have that.
And how difficult was that to make some of those decisions and changes? Did you go through a period of time where your team leadership, not even leadership, but the bench had to evolve.
It's both, because there's that, but then you also go and try to hire the high paid coach, right? That you think is going to just be able to come in and put the plays together, and that doesn't work either. So it's both. It's managing, like, oh, you can't just buy your way out of it, and you can't just promote your way to it. So it's finding that medium, and that's where I think as founders or visionaries, you have to be extremely diligent about who you let onto the team, and then if they're not the right person, moving them off.
Yeah, but I think probably the hardest part, Frank, is when you have to part ways with somebody that just passionately cares about the organization, but the organization has outgrown them, or the seat has outgrown them. And we try to be very direct and candid, because it's not doing them or the organization any favors by trying to keep them in a seat that they're no longer able to thrive in. And so we try to have very objective, candid conversations that are come from a point of compassion. One of the things we like to say is, we're cold on the numbers. Numbers are black and white, but we still want to be warm on people and compassionate about our people, and help them be in the best position to win, which may in some cases be no longer on this team if the team has outgrown them. So the people decisions are probably the hardest part of any organization. And you look at the professional sports teams, they're wrong 50% of the time with their draft picks, and they can watch the person play on the field and have all their stats and do all these personality profiles on top of it. And we're having to go off of a resume, an interview, a reference check. And we've, brought in some other tools like predictive index and things of that nature as well to help us, identify the right fits.
Thank you for tuning into the Emerging Franchise Brands podcast. For additional insights, guest applications, and to stay connected, visit us at efbpodcast.com. The Emerging Franchise Brands podcast is for entertainment purposes only, and the views expressed do not necessarily represent those of Emerging Franchise Brands, its host Frank Fiume, or Emerging Franchise Group LLC. Any discussed franchise or investment opportunity requires thorough investigation, obtaining proper disclosure documents, and expert consultation before making any investment decisions. The podcast and its host do not offer professional advice or endorsements, and they hold no responsibility for actions, representations, accuracy, or consequential damages related to the podcast content.